Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Adobe Live. My name is Terry White. Today we're going to be taking a look at the beginning of our photography daily challenge. So it's been a pleasure being at Max and seeing so many of you there. And I can't wait to kick this challenge off this week. And we're going to be going for like 9 straight days starting tomorrow. Doing challenges, doing photography work, doing all kinds of cool things. So I see Sam Peterson, Patty in the house, Lawrence, welcome everyone. Adobe Live, I know Gus and Paco are there in San Francisco. I'm here at home in Atlanta. But Tim, great to see all of you here. So if this is your first time watching, what's a daily creative challenge and what do you have to do or what can you do to participate? So we're going to go through that, and then I'm going to take you through a quick example of some of the things that a little bit more advanced, but some of the things that we're going to do today. Paul's asking, will there be an iPad involved? There will be an iPad involved at some point during the challenge. But let's get to the challenge itself. Let's get into talking about how you guys can participate. So first and foremost, if you are new, you can head over to behance.net/challenge/Photoshop. That way you can get there to register. You can sign up and you can see how it works. So the way it works, starting tomorrow morning, you'll receive the challenge, and more importantly, you'll get the ability to download the file that you can experiment with, that you can play with. If you don't have your own, of course, you can use your own for the challenges as well. But if you say, hey, they're doing a challenge on a landscape or a portrait or whatever, and I don't have one that's good enough to do the challenge with, you get one to play with. So I've uploaded all the files that you'll need for the next 9 days starting tomorrow. And you'll get the ability to download those and play with them and follow along in the challenge. Each day I'll kick it off with an example of how to do that particular challenge with that file. You can do it the way I did it, or more importantly, you can do it your way. You can be more creative and experiment with the various ways to work with the files that I'm going to show you. You can also join the community chat. That's more important or just as important, I should say, as working with the files, because it's a great way to get feedback on what you've done. It's a great way to give others feedback, constructive criticism, of course, if criticism at all, but we love praise too. And then you can, of course, share your work. So share it to Behance. I'm going to give you the hashtag to do that with. And then at that point, we'll take a look at your entries as well. Now, like I said, on this page is where you will find all the challenges that you'll unlock starting tomorrow. So they get unlocked automatically, I believe, at like 7 a.m. Pacific time. And then you can go in and start downloading the file and see what the challenge is for that day. I'll go live every day at 9 a.m. Pacific time to walk you through my interpretation of the challenge and how to do it. And then, like I said, you guys will do it on your own after that. Now, there's one more thing that you can do that helps you participate in the community besides the chat here on Behance, because once we're gone, once we're not live, how do you keep chatting? How do you keep the conversation going? And for that, we're going to switch over and I'm going to show you Discord. So Discord, this is the way to get to it. Sam Peterson posted the link in the chat, but here's the link for those of you watching after the fact or don't see the chat. You can go ahead and download the Discord app and create your own account. I'm going to go ahead and pop over to it myself. There it is. Okay. Discord. Let me go back to my desktop so you can see it. So this is what it looks like. Let me go full screen here. So you will be able to go in and chat the different categories or different topics that you can go in. So for example, you'll always see the current challenge. You'll see what entries people have posted. You'll see the feedback that they got. Lots of cool challenges. So you can go and look at the challenges of the past, which is what I'm doing right now, just scrolling through them, showing you how they look. And of course, if you want to go beyond just the daily challenge, you can go in and ask questions. You get tips and tricks, career advice. You can get like your own design makeover where you can ask people to help you out with your portfolio and things like that. So Discord is where the community talks, continuously after the challenge, during the challenge, before the challenge. this is where it all happens. And so once again, if you want to take advantage of that, go ahead and download the Discord app, and that way you'll be able to set up an account and participate and play along with us. So I can't wait to see your entries starting tomorrow with what we're going to be doing and the things that you're going to be working on day to day. Now, last time I did this, it was a photography challenge based solely on Photoshop. And we got, we heard from photographers that, well, while Photoshop is awesome, and while I love using Photoshop for what Photoshop is for, a lot of my work is done in Lightroom. So this challenge is going to be the first time we're doing one that's based on Lightroom and Photoshop. So I'm going to show you techniques for when you would use Lightroom. I'm going to show you for techniques for when Lightroom's not enough and you will go to Photoshop. I'm going to take you through the round tripping of going from your Lightroom organization over to Photoshop, do an edit, come back, and continue working with the files that way as well. So it's all about photography, all about Lightroom, all about Photoshop, and that's what we're going to be doing this week. Now, today, since we're not doing an official challenge yet today, I am going to walk you through an example, just a tutorial, so to speak, of how to use Photoshop and Lightroom together. I did a shoot over the weekend, just happened to coincide with this photography challenge. I did a shoot over the weekend. It was actually with a dancer. He's a professional ballet dancer, just a great guy. He came in studio with like a custom 18th century outfit on that was, for his next show. And we took some photographs of him. And I thought, wow, that'd be, first of all, I don't have any shots anywhere near like that in my portfolio, and it'd be fun to work on one of those with you today. So let's go ahead and jump over. Let's go back to my computer, and let's put Discord away for a second, and let's go over and talk about Lightroom. So now, speaking of Lightroom, you'll notice that I got two LRs here. I have Lightroom Classic and Lightroom. I know that naming system is kind of hard to wrap your head around at times, but Lightroom Classic is the tool that photographers have used for over a decade. It's the first, the first version of Lightroom, and it's got, everything in it. It's basically the Lightroom that's been refined and created by photographers from the ground up for over a decade. Then we have the new Lightroom, which is cloud-based. It's for, I would say, photographers that don't want to necessarily have to worry about managing the storage of their photos. They would just want them all backed up in sync. They want them on all their devices. And maybe they don't need every single feature that's in Classic. So I look at that as there are two different audiences. There's the Lightroom crowd, and then there's the Lightroom Classic crowd. One isn't necessarily more professional than the other one, but definitely the Classic version has more features than the other one. So I'm going to be using both during the week because I know there are people out there that will be using both. And of course, then there's Photoshop 2020, which just came out this week or last week at Max. We're going to be looking at that today as well. All right, so let's switch over to Classic. Here is one of the shots that we're going to be working on, or I'm going to be working on today. Here just now, let me go back to the gallery. So in the gallery, like these are the hundreds of shots that I took of, his name's Fuquan, hundreds of shots I took of him in his 18th century outfit. And I thought for this example, this would be a great one to show when you would need to go to Photoshop, when Lightroom's not enough. So for example, I put three in a separate collection, just three that I'm starting to work with and starting to work on. And if you look at each one of these, they all have one problem in common. They have the problem of his pose was just so great that I was having a problem fitting it all on the one background. The background just wasn't wide enough, in other words. So I need to extend the background out without cropping it so that I can keep the full frame and keep the composition the way I wanted it. Now on the left-hand side, I could crop out that reflector. That reflector literally is just in the way. Like I could have removed that and had all that room on the left side. So I don't want to lose space just because of a photography mistake. That was just, hey, I should have moved that out of the way. But on the right-hand side, I definitely ran out of room. So in each one of these cases, there's just stuff on the left and right hand side that is just in the way. Now, let's say all you had was Lightroom. If you were to hit your crop tool, your crop tool is in the shape of a rectangle. So even if you unlock the constraint, the best you're going to be able to do is this. Okay, that works. But then when you come on this side, oh, in order to get all that background cropped out, you're going to lose limbs. You're going to lose a hand and a foot. And so this is why cropping is just not going to cut it in this case. This is where Photoshop comes in, because there's nothing else Lightroom can do about that. Like, that is just, you should have taken a better photo. Like, you should have composed it better. You should have made more room. You should have got a different lens. Whatever the case is, Lightroom said, okay, at this point, I'm out. There's nothing else I can do. So I'm going to reset that crop, because we're not going to lose limbs today. We're going to go ahead and save. We're going to save limbs. We're going to go ahead and work on this in Photoshop, so where I can keep everything that I want about it. Now, in this case, I still would go through the process of making all my other edits in Lightroom, all the ones that are non-destructive, just to start with a better photo. So for example, I would first go in and go to my my lens corrections. I would make sure my lens profile correction is turned on. That just takes some of the bending and bowing out of the shot. I would, I don't have any problems with chromatic aberration, but if I did, I would remove that. The lighting in this case doesn't give me those issues. I would then go into my basic panel, and in my basic panel, I would switch this color profile, or this profile, to maybe Adobe Portrait, since it is a portrait. That just makes a slight adjustment to it. The next thing I notice is there's some clipping in the shadows, so I can see this warning up here letting me know there's some shadow clipping. But before I even worry about that, I usually 99.9% of the time auto-tone my shots. Now, auto-tone is going to make adjustments for me. I may not agree with all those adjustments, but it's going to make them. And if I don't like them, it just basically gave me all my starting points. It said, this is what I think you should do to the photo, and I can disagree all I want with individual sliders. But I don't have to start from scratch. The other thing, even before that, before the auto-tone, the other thing I might want to do is set the white balance. So the white balance is the overall color tone, or basically the correct color of the image. Now, luckily, there's a gray background here, so you typically want to target this eyedropper on something that's around 18% gray. If I didn't have something that's around 18% gray, if it wasn't on a gray background or I didn't have a gray card, then I would use something that should be white or should be black, meaning that, like, this should be black and his socks should be white. If they're not, if they're like too warm, like they're starting to be yellow because the image is too warm, or they're a different color tint, then that's letting you know right off the bat you need a white balance adjustment. So I'm gonna just go ahead and click, and that made my slight white balance adjustment. Then I can auto-tone it from there, and that adjusted the tone of his skin just a little bit more than I would normally do. That's because it cranked up saturation. So again, pull down the saturation, back down to 0. I would even pull down the vibrance a little bit more, even though that didn't negatively affect the skin. It's still probably a little bit too much. I still see some shadow clipping, but when I hover over the warning, I see the shadow clipping is in the areas of the photo I don't care about. It's in the upper right corner and in the lower left corner, the stuff I'm gonna get rid of anyway. So that's okay. I can see the highlight warning. Oh, I am getting some blown out highlights in his wardrobe. So that is a problem. So I'm gonna pull back on my whites until that highlight clipping warning goes away to bring that detail back. So what that warning was saying is that the whites in his costume were completely being blown out. There was no data, no pixels left. So that's why those warnings up here in your histogram are important. So again, the shadows, no problem. If it was a problem, I would pull this way and under the blacks, just like I pulled to the left under the whites. You can do the same thing with the sliders here. So before I did that, that's where I was getting that warning. The highlights were being blown out. Just pull back on the whites until that warning goes away. All right. Okay, so that is pretty much, I'm okay with the exposure. Maybe I'll pump up the shadows just a little bit more. I'm pretty much okay with everything else about the photo. Now it's time to go in and let's go to Photoshop. All right, Steve, you're absolutely right. What Steve just said is basically what I'm doing looks a lot like Camera Raw in Photoshop. You know why? Because Camera Raw in Photoshop and Lightroom's Develop module and Lightroom Cloud's Edit module are all exactly the same. They're based on the exact same engine. So whatever you're doing in one is really doing the same thing in the other one. It's just that typically people in Lightroom managing your photos, the difference is I could have 500 photos selected and doing these adjustments and adjusting all 500 at the same time. So that's why I like doing it in the Develop module as opposed to one by one or a few at a time in Lightroom's Camera Raw. All right, but you're right. I'm glad you saw that it is exactly the same thing. All right, so now that I've done those adjustments, now it's time to go fix the things that I can't fix in Photoshop, which is the left and right-hand side of the photo I can't fix in Lightroom. So I'm gonna go ahead and right-click. I normally would do this from the keyboard, but just to show you where it is, right-click, edit in Photoshop, or from the keyboard, Command-E. Once I do that, that will take a copy of the photo over to Photoshop. Now it's taken a copy automatically because this is a RAW file. If it were a JPEG, then it would ask you if you wanted to make a copy or not. So here I am in Photoshop now with all my ability to do anything to this photo. I can make layers, I can do whatever I want. I can add type, I can composite, I can do all the things that Lightroom doesn't do, including add pixels or replace pixels where I need them to on the background. Now, as I always say when I'm showing Photoshop, there's a million ways, literally in some cases, but at least dozens, if not hundreds of ways to do the exact same thing. So that the method you choose is literally up to you. Now, for example, some might choose to clone the background over there. Some might choose to just sample the color and fill the background over there. Some might choose content aware and do that. And some might choose clone stamp and clone it over, if I didn't say that already. Some might just select him and replace the entire background with a new background. There's a bunch of ways to do it, and no method is really wrong or right. It is whatever works best for you. Now, I would say there's no method that's wrong or right. There are methods that are better, but not necessarily your method's wrong. There just might be a method that's faster, takes less steps. And again, it depends on the individual. So you shoot in RAW. Yes, Patty, I shoot in RAW most of the time. Very rarely do I shoot in JPEG. Okay, so with that said, first thing I want to do, and now the other thing that comes up is, hey, shouldn't you duplicate the background first so you can always have something to go back to? I always have something to go back to because the original is untouched in Lightroom. So I don't waste my time. You can do it if you want. I don't waste my time duplicating the background in Photoshop just as a safety net because I have the safety net. It's the original in Photoshop or in Lightroom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that that side there, and I can do that a variety of different ways. I'm going to use the Quick Select tool to do it quickly. All right, as I always say, the Quick Select tool is named the Quick Select tool, not the Accurate Select tool, for a reason. All right, and I'm just going to select as much of that as I can. Now, you could feather the selection to kind of blend in the sides a little bit better, but I found that in this particular case, I tried this a little earlier, it didn't make a huge difference, but just to show you where you would do that, you would go up to your select menu, modify, feather, and you could, let's say I did 8 last time, let's try 10 pixels this time. That will just soften that selection up. I still needed to blend it more again, so it didn't matter. Now, at this point, I want to do a content-aware fill. The problem is, content-aware fill doesn't, by default, know what to fill in with. It just assumes everything else in the photo is fair game, including him. So if I hit delete or backspace on a PC, and I bring up the fill dialog box and choose content-aware, click OK, The results probably won't be awesome. They'll be okay, but they won't be awesome. So we'll give it a few seconds to do that. Patty, assuming that shooting in RAW gives you more data. It's basically, shooting in RAW is saying that I want the camera to produce the best possible image it can with no processing in the camera. That's what RAW really is. JPEGs are processed by the camera. RAW is not. RAW is processed in the computer by you. So what JPEG is saying is that when you're shooting in JPEG, you're saying, I just want a good photo, I'll let the camera do all the work. When I'm shooting in RAW, I want the best possible image from the sensor, I'll do the work. And that's really the difference. And this is what I meant by it wasn't awesome. So let's undo that. And let's use the new Content Aware Fill workspace instead. So instead of me hitting delete, I'll just go up to edit and choose Content Aware Fill, which brings up the new workspace, which automatically now, as of last week, tries to identify what the subject is to not fill in with. Now, in this case, it didn't do a good enough job, so I'm going to help it out. And by the way, every time I make an adjustment on the left side, it makes it in the preview on the right side. So I'm just going to say, nope, don't use any of this. This is all off limits. Don't use any of him. Don't use any of his side. Don't use any of his shoe. And I'm telling Photoshop what not to use. And it's not going to come over this far, but just in case, don't use any of this either. Now, every time I do that, it will adjust the preview on the right-hand side. So the preview just updated just now. And so the seam is still bad, and I expect it to be bad. But now what I'm looking at, I don't care about the seam. What I'm looking at is the pattern on the right-hand side. Does that look good or not? And so you have different color adaptations to experiment with to try it out. So it defaults to default. You can change it to high, and you'll get a preview update to see what that looks like. I don't like high, that's too much shadow. I can switch it to very high, which is probably not going to be any better. Don't like that either. I can switch it to none. So don't rule out none. Sometimes color adaptation's not great. So in this case, color adaptation wasn't great. Switching to none was better. So I'll click OK. That gives me the shot I need. I'm almost out of time here, but I'm going to go ahead now and fix the seam. I can fix the seam a lot of ways, but I'm just going to do it a quick way with the patch tool here. Using my Wacom stylus. Just go in, select that seam. Since we have so much background to work with, and we'll just go ahead and use the other side of the photo as the patch. Awesome. Now, I can still blend it in some more with the patch tool just so we don't ever see a seam. And a lot of it's because we knew it was there, so we see it. But the average person walking in would never know that that was there to begin with. And okay, so now we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to make a selection. And we can Content Aware Fill that in. That one might work better. Alberto, what's going on? And that one did work better because it didn't have him to pick from, and I was also able to overlap the background a little bit more. And now I can just go in and just fix some of the things that weren't part of the original problem. That just gives me a better looking floor without all the footprints. Don't want to mess up that reflection of that gold shoe. And there we go. Now, I'm going to keep working on this, but for the sake of time, we're going to save it, close it, come back to Lightroom, and Lightroom does exactly what I said. It keeps my original, so here's my original file, intact. If I messed up, I always have this one to go back to, and my new one with my new background that I don't have to worry about seeing things that I don't want to see, like parts of the wall and things like that. Okay. Last but not least, at this point, if you were going to export this out for your creative challenge, you would just go to File, choose Export. And I'm going to say for social media, let me go back down. No, I don't want to do any of those. User presets, I'm going to say for web gallery or for web, for example. And this is out of date, actually. Let's do for web. Yeah, this is out of date too. So let's do these. I'm going to do the longest edge. 1080 is great for Instagram. 72 pixels per inch. And remove the location info. I'm just say copyright info and contact info for the metadata. And put it in a folder, subfolder called Photoshop Daily Challenge. By the way, and that is the hashtag for sharing as well. Quality, I'm going to bump the quality up to maybe around 80%. And sRGB for the color space for the web and export. And I have an image on the web or on the desktop now that would be shareable. So with that said, everybody, I want to just remind you what's coming up next. So stay tuned. 9:30, Adobe Live is going to go live with Aaron Nace with photo compositing. And with that said, cheers everybody. Thanks for watching. And I can't wait to catch you tomorrow on the next one. Bye everybody. Have a great one.